In this video, I'm going to show you how to assemble this table number. Hey everyone, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Carly and I love all things crafting. And in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to assemble a table number that was cut using my Cricut and my Glowforge. So if you love cutting machine crafts like the Cricut or the Glowforge, make sure to check out my other videos and subscribe to my channel. In this tutorial, I am going to show you the assembly portion of this table number craft, but I will walk you through how I cut everything and what settings I used to cut using my Cricut and my Glowforge. All right, so to get started, here's what the finished product looks like, and then I have all my pieces kind of already cut out for you to make it a little bit easier. So the two pieces that were cut on my Cricut, I cut this faux leather. This is faux leather. It's not real and it's not laser safe. So I could not cut this on my Glowforge, but let me open up the settings so that you can screenshot or jot those down if you have a Cricut cutting machine. In Design Space, these are the different pieces that I cut with my Cricut machine. And if you're looking for the file that I used, I do have it listed in my Etsy shop, so I will link to that in the video description. So the different components, you have your faux leather piece, which I will show you the settings that I used. I have my iron-on piece, which will cut with the iron-on setting. And then these are two cardstock templates that we will talk about a little bit later on in the video. So let me show you the settings for each of these components. I'm using a maker machine for this video, but you can cut this with other machines. So if you have a Silhouette, a Brother Scan & Cut, a Caesar machine, all these will cut the faux leather and the cardstock and iron-on. So for the faux leather, I'm just going to leave it positioned just like this. For the iron-on, you'll want to make sure to mirror it, and you'll want to make sure to have as many copies as you need. So I only put one in my file, but you can make as many copies as you need. And then these two will be cut on cardstock. For the faux leather, I'm using my maker, and if you're using a machine that has a dial, you'll want to turn it to custom and then choose browse all materials. And then if you search for the word faux, there's this faux suede option, and it does not have the Cricut icon next to it. You'll want to choose that one and then click done. For the maker, this uses the rotary tool, which is the tool you want, and it will cut it beautifully. So here is the result, cutting it with the rotary blade, and this is what the back of that material looks like. Kind of has like a fabric-y material on the back, which will make it really great for the back of our table number. So that is the setting. If you want to screenshot it, it's faux suede. I use the default pressure and the rotary blade. Next, for the table numbers, we are going to use everyday iron-on, but this will be dependent on the type of iron-on you use. I think this is Starcraft iron-on. I will link to everything in the video description. So this is cut the mirror image. You weed away the excess, and then you're going to apply it this way. So this is iron-on material, which is the material that you would use to apply to a t-shirt or a garment. So we're using it on our table numbers, but it is iron-on material or heat transfer vinyl. The next two items we're going to cut on medium cardstock. So both the template for the word table and then the numbers will be cut on medium cardstock, this one here. So let me show you what that looks like. These two pieces of paper are going to help us align our images. And then in the file, I do have a set 1 through 20. So all of the numbers have a template so that you can easily align your gold acrylic numbers. And then this one I'm going to use to align where the word table goes, and that will stick right here, centered onto that opening so that it's in the same place on every single table. So that's what this template does here. When you cut your table words, you'll want to make sure that you keep the weeding box on and then just trim around where the weeding box is when you're going to cut your table numbers apart so that you have the box that matches up with the template. The next two items, three really, We have clear acrylic that will be cut on the Glowforge. This is 1/8 thick. We have mirror gold acrylic. And then I have a thicker acrylic. This is actually just leftover acrylic from a different project, but it's a little bit thicker. I'll give you the exact dimensions, and that will be our stand. So I did choose to do a thicker stand just to make the bottom a little bit more sturdy. So when it stands up, there's no wiggle or jiggle, and I will show you the settings I used for that as well. So now hopping over to the Glowforge app, in my file, I do have notes. So this note says you can nest these together as close as you'd like. If you're cutting mirror acrylic, don't forget to mirror your image and cut from the back of your acrylic. And then I have a note that 1 through 9 are slightly larger than 10 through 20 to fit nicely. And then you can delete out my notes on your file. And if I were cutting mirror acrylic like I did, you would want to mirror these images. So if you have the premium version, you can flip it in the app. If you don't, you'll need to flip it and then upload it. I use the medium yellow acrylic setting and just the proof grade cut, which is speed of 163 and full power. And that cuts my gold acrylic really nicely. You'll want to make sure you don't nest your gold acrylic numbers too close together, because if you do, they will kind of fog up. It's like a burnout where the laser goes through the cracks and it burns the finish on the mirror acrylic. I haven't peeled away the masking on these, and these were nested kind of tight, so you may see what I'm talking about a little bit later on in the video. So you don't want to nest them too closely, but close enough to where you don't waste material. So that's my setting for the gold mirror acrylic numbers. And then for my arch and my base, I'm going to show you those settings. And then another note, you'll want to make sure to adjust the slot width to accommodate for your material, which I will show you since we'll be doing that during the process. So for the arch, my settings are on medium clear acrylic, cut, and it's just the proof grade cut. So let me show you that again. 170 speed and full power. So I just use the proof grade cut for that. And then I will show you later on what my settings are for the thicker acrylic that we're using. When it comes to assembling these table numbers, there is an order of operations that I like to follow since I'm using heat transfer vinyl. If you are using regular adhesive vinyl, you could kind of change up the steps, but since I'm using heat transfer vinyl, I need to press my words on first. So using that template that I cut on my Cricut, I'm going to line this up with the bottom and then center this in between my template. And that will place my words in the same place on every table number. So I'm going to stick that on. The heat transfer tape will hold that in place. When I made all of my table numbers, I stuck all of the words on and then took all of them over to my heat press so I could do it all at the same time, which made it way faster. My other piece of advice is that if you're using a heat press, do super low pressure because you don't want there to be any type of pressing lines around the edge of the transfer tape. You can also use a home iron or an easy press. You're just going to use low heat and low pressure. I pressed it at 270 degrees for about 15 seconds. Here is what my faux suede looks like right out of the heat press. And then I'm going to peel it while it's still warm. And you can see that even with super low pressure, there's a slight, ever so slight pressing mark. What you do if that happens to you is just take a lint roller. You kind of fluff up the faux leather fibers and it won't be so noticeable. Now that I have my iron-on my faux suede, I'm going to attach that to my acrylic. So to do that, I'm using a spray adhesive, this 3M Super 77. This is my favorite spray adhesive. You will want to use a box to catch your overspray and spray the back of the faux leather on the white side. Before you spray it, use that same lint roller. Make sure that you get all your lint and debris off of your back of the table number because you don't want to see that on the back side of your project. I have an old shipping box and then I just place some butcher paper at the bottom of it so that I can use this box over and over and just replace the sheet of butcher paper without damaging my table number. And then you'll want to give your can a shake before you spray it. Shake it up. And I found it easiest to tilt my box up kind of at an angle. So when I spray it, my can is kind of held more directly up. So I'm just gonna spray. You'll wanna do this in a very well ventilated space. Make sure your windows are open, you have a purifier and a fan running, because this is pretty fumy. Now, before you rush in and grab it, you'll wanna let this kind of get tacky before you pull it out. So I'm going to set this aside and prep my acrylic. I'm going to use another sheet of butcher paper to protect my work surface so that I don't get my table numbers dirty. I'm going to peel the masking off of my table numbers. And if you're looking for where I buy all of my supplies, everything will be linked in the video description where I got everything. So here's my faux suede. A tip to test to see if it's tacky enough is you can use your knuckle, and if it's sticky, it's ready to go. This is probably the hardest part of the entire project because you want to line up your acrylic with your faux suede. And I have had most success if I start at the top. So I'm going to get my head in the way just for a second so I can see. But I kind of just tap it along the edges, and I want to make sure that it goes all the way to the bottom. And I'm going to push it over to the other side. Now, don't freak out if it's not perfect. I know my first few, I was a little bit worried that it wasn't on there perfectly. But when you flip it over, if it's not perfect, you kind of can wiggle it into place. So mine wasn't all the way to that edge, and I can kind of just grip it and pull it over because there's a lot of flex in this material, and it's not the end of the world. So even though it's looking a little tragic right now, don't worry. So I'm just going to take a look at the other side and make sure that it's covering all the way to the edges. Okay, and once you're happy with where it's at, use a brayer and just smooth it out. Here's how it looks from the back. You can see there's no lint or debris since we lint rolled it. And when I was making my table numbers, I let them sit overnight to dry so that when I trimmed off the excess, there was no shifting. But since I'm doing this for a tutorial, I'm going to just show you what I would do next. But if you were making these, I would let them all sit and dry overnight if you can, so that when you go to cut off the excess, it doesn't move on you. So I'm just going to brayer it on really well before I trim off the excess. So the next part is completely optional. If the excess around the edges does not bother you, you don't need to trim it off. But since I'm a little bit of a perfectionist, I needed to trim it off. So I'm just using this itsy bitsy rotary trimmer. And I'm just going to push my rotary blade into the edge of the acrylic, and that will act as my guide to trim off any excess that got pulled over the edges. So I didn't take much off the edges, but you can see that I did trim away a little bit of material, and you can just go through and smooth it up as much or as little as you want. And now we're ready for the next step. The next step is where we will use this paper template. So like I mentioned, the file that I have on Etsy does come with 1 through 20, and this will allow you to line up your numbers so that they're all at the same height and look really even without you guessing. Because without the template, it's not super hard to line this up, but you can see that there's a lot of variation in where you can place these, and you want to make sure they're at the same height. And so without having to measure, these templates take a few minutes to cut. And if you're deciding to sell these as an item in your shop, you can save the paper templates and use them on every set. So you can just place your numbers, and you can see how easily I can center those up. And the gold that I used, I purchased it with 3M adhesive already on the back of it, so I don't have to worry about spraying these. So I just remove the back liner, and it reveals a sticky adhesive. And then holding my template in place, I'm just going to center that up and push it down into place. Okay, so there's my 2, and then my 0. I'm going to do the same thing. I can remove my template and then push those into place. And these numbers are stuck on pretty well immediately, but they will continue to tack up and become more permanent as you let it set. And if you are interested to see what the mirror acrylic looks like, I'll peel off the masking and you can see just how pretty that looks. So pretty. I love these table numbers so much. Okay, last step. I know that it feels like there's a million steps to make these, but once you do one and then you batch out all the different steps, I did all of the iron-on at the same time. I cut all the numbers at the same time, and then assembly went pretty quickly. For the last step, I do have a full tutorial on this because it is a little complicated since I added faux suede to the top of my acrylic. But if you're, again, a perfectionist like me and you want to make the slot perfect for every table number, you can measure every table number individually. You can also just use the average of the thickness and say it's good enough. But for me, I did measure every single table number and cut each slot to the size because I wanted it to be a snug fit. So to do that, you can watch the full tutorial. I'm going to do a brief overview. You're going to measure the thickness of your project. So 0.135 there and 0.137 there. So I'm going to take the larger measurement, 0.137, and you can see that I squeezed in. So it did depress the faux suede a little bit, which means it'll be super tight. On the file, it does say that you need to adjust that slot size. So I'm going to adjust it. My slot size was 0.137, but if you watch the other video, you know that I subtract 0.01 from that, make sure everything is aligned perfectly, and make that a compound path. So now I'm going to take this and put that into Glowforge. I just powered on my Glowforge, so you'll hear that humming in the background. And I have my thicker piece of acrylic that I'm going to cut, and this is 0.225. So just a little bit thinner than 1/4 of an inch. So my table number acrylic is 1/8 of an inch. So this is double the thickness at about 1/4 of an inch. For the thicker acrylic, I changed my settings to be 120 for the speed and full power, and that cut through my almost 1/4 inch acrylic. So we'll click start, and then I'll cut that. Here's the thicker acrylic right out of the laser. It does have a little bit of ash on it, so I'm just going to wipe that down. Make sure my fingers don't have any ash on them. So there is a right and a wrong way to put this together. The bottom side, you'll want this side that was facing the honeycomb to be on the bottom of your project. So I'm going to pop out the slot piece and then peel away my masking. And you can see it's a nice thick piece of acrylic. So now with the correct side on the bottom and the correct side on the top, I'm going to assemble it. Since I didn't let my 3M adhesive cure overnight, the faux leather has a tendency to lift, but don't worry, after doing 20 of these and being impatient with some of them, I do have a little bit of a hack for that. This is heat resistant tape. It's really difficult to tear, so it works really great for this little hack I've made up. I'm going to stick it to the bottom of my project, probably like 1/16 of an inch up, and then I'm just going to flip it over and trim it. So I have heat resistant tape on the bottom of the faux suede, and then when I insert it into the slot, this slot is really, really tight, so you will kind of have to use a little bit of muscle. Just squeeze it in there. And once it's pretty much flush, you can pull away this heat resistant tape and it won't rip, which is really cool. And I actually use these on 2 table numbers. I just flipped it over and used the other side again, so I wasn't completely wasting this piece of tape. So you can reuse that. And then just run your fingers over to make sure it's flush. If it's not completely flush, you can stand it up and kind of just push it down onto your tabletop. And since I used the technique where I subtract 0.01 of an inch, this stand is so tight and sits pretty much at a perfect 90-degree angle. So there's really no wiggle. If I shake this table number, the stand's not coming off. So I really do think that you want to make sure that you have a really tight fit. But there is my table number. This is number 20 that I've made, and I've learned a lot while doing it. So I wanted to share all of my tips and tricks. If you're looking for the digital file, you can purchase that on my Etsy shop. And if you're having difficulty assembling it and you have questions, make sure to leave those in the comments. And again, if you're looking for any of the supplies used to make these table numbers, everything will be linked. And I hope that you find making these as fun as I did. I've really enjoyed making these. If you found this video helpful, make sure to like it and consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.